Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast, everyone. My name's Elijah. Jesse talked to you guys just a day or two ago about the acquisitions of Zach Eflin, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and Christian Pache on this pod. Given that the trade deadline is coming up in just over a day and a half here, it's Tuesday, the 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern. We're going to keep rolling with trade talk. I think the simple thing to do is just look at what holes remain on the Orioles and where we might go to plug them. Before we get into all of that, of course, I want to thank the sponsor of this show. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BLEAV, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. BetOnline, the game starts here. So let's just take stock of the Orioles roster a little bit. I think, the simple way to do it is just go position group by position group, take a look. Obviously, catchers were completely set. Adley and James McCann. Have to think that the O's are also pretty comfy with where we stand on the infield. First baseman Ryan O'Hearn and Ryan Mountcastle. Jordan Westberg, Connor Norby holding down second. Gunnar at short, of course. Westberg and Urias holding down third base. I think that, given we have Jackson Holliday and Kobe Mayo, who will presumably be up sometime, theoretically, maybe, who knows. But given they are on their way, do not expect to see an acquisition here on the infield. It wouldn't make any sense. Something that I will note is that, the loss of Jorge Mateo for an extended period does leave us a tiny bit vulnerable without a true backup shortstop. Gunnar plays nearly every day, but recently, I think I'm recording this on Monday afternoon. He's got 4 errors in the last 4 games. He has shown signs that he really needs a day off. And so there was a report today that Westberg was taking some ground balls at shortstop. Obviously, he played a ton of shortstop in the minors. That was his primary position. It does feel like a lot to just kind of stick on him mid-season, sliding between 3 positions potentially. Ramon Urias is really the other option, but at shortstop, he's really kind of subpar, just doesn't have the range for it. He's more a first step guy and can cover third base consequently. But I guess to take a step back, despite that loss of Mateo, eventually Jackson Holliday is going to be up taking second base. He can slide over to short. That is his natural position as well. Kobe Mayo eventually, there's really no reason to make an acquisition for the infield. The outfield is a little bit more complicated. Obviously, right field manned by Santander and Kjerstad, center field by Mullins, Cowser, presumably the newly added Christian Pache, left field by Cowser and Kjerstad. I think the interesting part about this is that after the departure of Hayes and arrival of Pache, while you still have kind of the same mix of outfielders, you've got 3 left-handed, 1 switch hitter, 1 right-handed. Now that right-handed hitter, Pache really doesn't hit well. That's not his calling card. He's a great defender, really excellent. But you just don't trust him to really hold down a spot against a left-handed pitcher every day like Hayes would. Every day against a left-handed pitcher, I should say. Obviously, we were platooning Hayes a little bit. But Pache, even with the platoon advantage against left-handed pitching, has only a 662 OPS. It's a 229, 333, 329 slash, the rare OBP higher than slugging. But, despite that being almost double what he does against right-handed pitching, it's still below a league average hitter. And that's with the platoon advantage only. So, you look and you see like, okay, what's with Pache here? What's the ideal alignment against lefties? It had previously been Santander in right, Cowser in center field, and then we would stick Hayes in left. I think, the ideal alignment against lefties then kind of becomes a question, because do you really trust Pache in this situation? So Mullins has been nearly as bad against left-handed pitching as Pache has been against righties. Neither one has an OPS over 400 against, with the platoon disadvantage. So, either Pache is starting in center field or Cowser is sliding over, which is what we had primarily seen when Hayes was here. And then that leaves a hole in left field. Presumably, maybe Heston Kjerstad would fill that role. I think your only options are Pache in center, Cowser in left, or Cowser in center, Kjerstad in left. But when you start looking at Heston Kjerstad in this, in this context, he has some platoon splits too. I know a lot of people on Twitter, online, in the Orioles community are like vying for him to get more at bats against lefties. He has a 500 average against lefties on the year, but that's in 8 plate appearances. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Looking down at AAA, OPS was 300 points lower against left-handed pitchers. Only 2 of his 16 home runs in Norfolk this year came against left-handed pitching. So there definitely are platoon splits, and against major league pitching that will get exposed to a higher extent. So, maybe you say here that Pache in center field and Cowser in left is the best alignment, Tony in right field, of course. But Cowser is slightly worse than league average against left-handed pitching. Pache would be slightly less than league average against left-handed pitching. So you are taking some hits, and this is in the context of the best hitter on your team, Gunnar Henderson, also is at the platoon disadvantage, and our best hitter against left-handed pitching, which was probably Adley Rutschman, is in a terrible slump right now. So the disadvantages kind of start to pile up, and against left-handed pitching, you look like you're a lot weaker than you really are. So, all of that to me leaves open the possibility of adding another right-handed outfielder. I think, it definitely invites a few questions when you say that. First, is there any kind of sensible world where you can have 6 outfielders on a roster? I think the short answer is no. The initial reaction is that it's pretty insane. If you just saw me jump on YouTube, it's because my computer was going to die. I had to run and plug that in. I'm going to cut it out, but we're back. So 6 outfielders on a roster is kind of an insane thing. I do not think that the Orioles want to go down a man in the bullpen. There's no real need for that. We always feel like we're shortchanged as it is. So I went through some mind games with, a lineup where, against righties, you have O'Hearn at first, Kjerstad DHing, Tony, Cedric Mullins, and Colton Cowser in the outfield. That's really lovely. Against left-handed pitching, Mountie would be at first base, Tony, Cowser, and some trade acquisition across the outfield. That's also lovely. But, if we're not going a man down in the bullpen to accommodate this, somebody's got to get booted from the roster. I think Ramon Urias would be the first choice, but Norby doesn't play third. Westberg cannot play every game over there. Norby could theoretically be optioned, but you kind of run into the same issue. Westberg and Urias then have to cover every game between second and third. Neither one gets a day off. Again, like with going a man down in the bullpen, theoretically, if we acquire another arm, we push Albert Suarez, then you've got 2 guys who can give some length in Cole Irvin, Albert Suarez. I don't necessarily like that, but it is an option. All of that said, though, this is why speculation about Cedric Mullins being on the trade block has come up. If he sits the bench every time a lefty comes in, and you have a cheaper option in Heston Kjerstad, who packs more of a punch in the lineup, and Cowser is playing legitimately good center field, he's been phenomenal this year, why not replace Cedric with a talented right-handed hitter who can play a solid corner outfield and hits lefties very well? I want to take this moment to say I love Cedric Mullins. He is the first real Orioles jersey I have bought in my adult life. It's the first one I've acquired at all since Matt Wieters that my parents got us in Wieters' rookie year. So, I am not the type of person to hate on Ced. I think in many, many ways, it's so important to have, a black player, especially in a predominantly black city like Baltimore is, representing the team. He's been with us for so long. He's got the incredible story of dropping switch hitting, coming back to the 30-30 season. Certainly one of the best seasons I've seen in my time as an O's fan. Cedric is phenomenal. And by no means am I just trying to get rid of him. I think I am beholden to the logic. And despite the fact that he's been playing better recently, which he certainly has, and all respect to him, the logic points to Cedric as the person that would go in order to shape the roster in such a way that gives you a more ideal lineup against both left and right-handed pitching. The other solution, if we wanted to keep Ced, which I'm of course a fan of, it's something that Jesse alluded to in the last episode. If we do not want to get rid of Cedric, then I think the crux of it becomes we swapped Austin Hayes, a right-handed hitter who we were comfortable with playing the outfield, for a right-handed hitter who we're not so comfortable. We swapped a right-handed hitter who we were comfortable with in the outfield, but also comfortable with hitting, for somebody we're not so comfortable with hitting. So we could potentially use Christian Pache as a piece, try to flip him for somebody we trust in the lineup a little bit more. Pache still has a number of years of control, plays really stellar defense. There is a place for that in Major League Baseball. He would not carry immense value because, of course, he is limited. His ceiling will never be an all-star, will probably never be your starting center fielder on the team. But that said, you could potentially line something up for somebody who might be more of a rental, shorter term or lower upside, or somebody who is a platoon player themselves. So I think there are opportunities there. On the pitching side, Zach Eflin was a really nice addition to this team. Sir Anthony Dominguez as well. Jess has already talked about those a bit, so I'm not going to linger on it. But a playoff rotation of Burns and either order of Eflin Rodriguez as your front three feels pretty promising. Can talk a little bit more about playoffs in a sec. But pushing Dean into the 4 with Albert Suarez holding down the 5, I think we're much, much more stable after the trade, of course. We're no longer reliant on Cade Povich and a spot start from McDermott. 2 rookies. Povich had really been pretty inconsistent in his time here. That's not a knock on him. Still very much a fan, and expect him to compete for a rotation spot next year. It's just that this is his first year and we're struggling right now. So we need to stabilize and we need something reliable to build off of. Zach Eflin helps that. But all that said, Albert Suarez has also struggled in recent weeks. Command has been pretty inconsistent. I think that one more back-end rotation addition would go a long way towards just lengthening the rotation, and it would help the bullpen to an extent by adding Albert Suarez to that pen. I think ideally what the Orioles would like is to have him filling the role that Cole Irvin is filling, that long man role. I don't think we want to risk Cole Irvin being lost. I think that we value the ability to stretch him out quickly, throw him into the rotation at a moment's notice, and he's cost controlled, will not be expensive through arbitration because he is, I didn't want to say bad, but limited talent-wise. I'm not sure that's much better, but obviously he will not cost too much money to keep on the team. He is flexible. Stuff does play up out of the pen a little bit, so there is reason to keep Cole Irvin around, and I understand that. So I anticipate as soon as we get Suarez to the pen, probably Birch Smith would be the corresponding move. Suarez definitely has some more K potential than Irvin, so some potential to get Suarez into maybe a little bit more of a moderate leverage situation. I don't think he's ever going to take the 8th or 9th inning for us, but Suarez would definitely be welcomed. To the playoffs, though, in terms of a playoff rotation, a lot of times in a 7-game series, you will require a 4th starter, particularly if you get to a second 7th-game series. It sounds like the Orioles are shopping toward the higher end of the starting pitching market. We have been linked to Blake Snell. We have been linked to Jack Flaherty. Flaherty is definitely a rental. Blake Snell is very likely a rental. Have to assume that if he performs well, he will be opting out, looking for a longer-term contract. I am absolutely not going to bore you with another discussion about Tarik Skubal and Garrett Crochet. They are probably not getting traded. I mean, Crochet more likely than Skubal, but I do not think that the Orioles are getting either one of them, and that is totally fine with where we stand right now in my eyes. I was going to talk about Eric Fetty a little bit here, but actually, as I was recording, he is getting traded to the Cardinals in a 3-way deal. So won't talk about Fetty, but guys of his ilk are probably where we're looking. Our bullpen is in relatively good shape. There have been rumors of us in the market for a left-handed reliever. Obviously, Danny Coulomb is out, supposed to return in September-ish, if I remember correctly. That would be welcomed. But in the meantime, Cionel Perez has been pushed into leverage spots as a result. He has done just fine, but it leaves Keegan Aiken as the only other kind of medium leverage arm in the pen. At this point, we have Aiken and Cole Irvin, who are both capable of kind of the long man role in relief. Also play up a little bit in shorter stints, but neither one is really like a leverage guy that you want. So I think that replacing Aiken with a more talented arm from the left side gives you a lot of confidence in being able, to really shorten games. It's a really, really special thing, especially in the playoffs. We've seen like the old Royals teams with Wade Davis, Greg Holland, and whoever that third closer they had was. But the game becomes 6 innings and it's that much more valuable. If the more ability we have to match up, the better we are, of course. So another pretty talented left-handed arm in the pen, I think, would go a long way for us. People talk about a closer to replace Craig Kimbrell. I don't believe it's entirely necessary. I don't think it's worth the cost at all. The prices that Carlos Estevez from the Angels and Jason Adam from the Rays have gone for have been astronomical. I think a lower cost acquisition and the ability to match up, if we do get a lefty, I think that likely does us just as well. What I will say about Kimbrell, because I know he's a hot topic right now, but the last 2 saves that he has blown were partially a couple of errors behind him, and the Jerickson Profar home run was a fastball an inch off the outside corner. Sometimes stuff just happens. Sometimes it feels like it piles up. I don't think that Kimbrell, he walks guys. He's erratic. That is something that we've known. I don't think that he is like falling apart at the seams, and we already thought that once this year. So, I'm sure the Orioles are working on ways to try to stabilize him a little bit, make him more consistent. But no part of me thinks that, he suddenly doesn't deserve the closer role. He still strikes guys out at an elite rate. The stuff is very, very good. And I just wanted to throw that in there. It doesn't really pertain to the episode, but I don't think we need to go get Mason Miller to go and have confidence in this pen when the time that the postseason rolls around. I'm just not, I guess, that reactionary. I'm not at that point yet. But anyway, so where do the Orioles go for all of this? I am not one to come here and give you proposals because it's, nearly impossible to predict who the returns would be. All of us, we know the major league team, we know AAA a bit. But, I could not have put together a package of Matthew Etzel, Justin Armbruster, and Matt Horvath. I know who those guys are, but trying to put a trade proposal together, from the hundreds and hundreds of players in the Orioles system is the front office's job, and it's their job for a reason. So I'm just going to give you targets for each of those couple roles that I discussed. First, I think I should mention the methodology here is that I'm looking at a combo of teams who are clearly in sell mode, as well as a few who might be opportunistically adding and subtracting. And then I'm just looking at what they've got and saying, okay, that looks nice. I clearly put a little bit more thought in than that, but I wanted to just point out that I go team first, and that will never lead me to proposing the Austin Hayes trade. That is a shortcoming of the way I'm looking at it. I'm never going to look to the top team in the National League and say, okay, what can I get from you? I am limiting it to bad teams and moderately okay teams with a couple, expiring contracts. So all of that, again, is why I'm podcasting, and I'm not in an MLB front office. But that said, for the right-handed hitting outfield position, my initial search of bad teams and good performance against lefties, it kind of came up with some funny names. I saw Miguel Andujar, I saw Daz Cameron, both performing very well against lefties this year. I don't want either for pretty obvious reasons. Andujar cannot play in the field. I would be so mortified to see him in left field at our stadium at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. Daz Cameron, I'm not buying the performance. It would be objectively hilarious, though, if we brought back Daz Cameron. But on a serious note, Tommy Pham has come up a number of times. He's a rental on a bad team. A few really good notes here. 94th percentile chase rate, 82nd percentile squared up. He's a very disciplined hitter. He consistently, maximizes the quality of his contact. Defensively, he is not an ideal fit for left field at Camden Yards, but, it is potentially something you would entertain because the bat is good. In a similar vein, Taylor Ward from the Angels, he's a free agent not till 2027, but he is 30 years old now, so you are, renting his prime, so to speak. Defensively, he is also not a fit, not very good in the field, but the bat is even better than Pham's. Quality of contact is phenomenal. He has great swing decisions, 95th percentile chase rates. He will K because he swings aggressively, but that kind of fits what the Orioles do, as we have seen. We emphasize swing decisions as opposed to drawing a walk. So he will strike out a bit, but yeah, great swing decisions, really knows how to impact the ball. Lane Thomas from the Nats is another bat first guy, but has been rumored to be available. He would be controlled this year and next. One thing I have seen as a knock on him is just his defense. It has showed pretty terribly this year. By StatCast outs above average, he's down in the bottom 10%. But he was a net positive defender last year by outs above average, and his sprint speeds are over 29 feet per second, which is borderline elite. So definitely some reason to think that he, with a couple mental tweaks, with a couple preparation things, would be able to handle left field for us. Also from the Angels, maybe one that I prefer most on this list is Kevin Pillar. Against left-handed pitching, he's produced a ton. Part of that is due to an insane 477 BABIP, which does imply that there will be some regression here, but his X stats, expected stats based on quality of contact and such, still look really, really strong. Expecting batting average of 333, expected slugging of 538. So his true performance definitely is still really strong against lefties. We have seen him play D throughout his entire career, of course. We are no stranger to that. He's ruined a lot of Orioles games in center field. He's a bit older now, but StatCast will show that he's in the 30th percentile for range. That's been mostly as a center fielder, so I think taking that burden off of him will probably help. Put him in left field. His sprint speeds are still well above average. He can still cover some ground. And because he is a rental this year, I think he wouldn't cost too much to acquire. I really like the thought of a Kevin Pillar. So looking to some arms here, going back to the Athletics, we're ignoring, Andujar and Daz Cameron, but, I'm also going to ignore Mason Miller when I talk about the relievers, but Lucas Erceg has been really, really strong as their setup man. He averages 98.5 miles an hour on the fastball. Average exit velocities against him are in the 99th percentile. Kind of the fascinating thing about him, his surface results are still very good, don't get me wrong. But his changeup gets destroyed, and almost no other pitch does. I think this is a situation where some tweaks to his pitch usage can really elevate his game even more. He's got the huge fastball, he's got a sinker, and he's got a slider. I think that should be all he really needs. And yeah, expect Erceg to be really great. He's a free agent in 2030, but he is a little bit older. So some question as to, how much he would cost as a result of that. Do expect it would cost a pretty penny. The other arm from the Athletics, which is a very, very different flavor, is Austin Adams. So, I watched him a little bit with the Mariners back in the day. He is very wild. He has high walk rates, but what is good about him is very, very good. He is a slider first pitcher. When I say slider first, I should emphasize this is really slider first. He throws 3/4 of his pitches are sliders. So his surface results have been only okay, but huge K rates, whiff rates, and really the quality of contact against him is miserable. He could certainly be used in leverage spots. The walks would give some anxiety. We're not strangers to that at this point with Kimbrel. but yeah, he just goes up there and just throws sliders as hard as he can, and it confuses people. It's a good slider, lots of movement, two plane. So he's pretty interesting, and would have him this year and next. Michael Kopech has been mentioned a lot. I feel obligated to mention him here. I think my brain would explode having to watch him and Craig Kimbrell in the same bullpen. He is extremely volatile. He, I think, has as many blown saves as saves this year. But still, he throws high 90s and he strikes out more than 30% of people that he faces. He is also on the White Sox, so he should be mentioned. He is out there. He's somebody that we could potentially acquire and stick him into lower leverage situations. If we do spring for Kevin Pillar or Taylor Ward, could look to include a couple of arms from the Angels, Luis Garcia being the first one. Hard-throwing sinker baller. He is only controlled this year, which means he is very likely to be moved. But the biggest note on him, he really doesn't strike people out much, but he induces a ton of ground balls. He would kind of fit into the Yennier Cano mold. Certainly not a bad thing, but as we mentioned, our pen really is lacking in Ks. That is the thing we need. It's why we let so many inherited runners score, because we cannot punch somebody out to get out of the situation. So also with the Angels, if we want to pay a premium, this would certainly cost a lot. Ben Joyce is also out there. You are never quite sure with the Angels to what degree they're going to sell, but if he is somehow available, he's riding a 15+ game scoreless appearance streak. Is one of the hardest throwers in the game. Fastball averages 99.8, reaches 103. I remember back in college, he was hitting 105. He does not strike out as many guys as you'd think with that, but he also never gets barreled because the stuff is so good. He would be with us until 2030 again, so I don't fully expect that he's actually available. But that said, really, really interesting arm. And if we are going for a Kevin Pillar or a Taylor Ward, you could maybe package something there. So, two birds, one stone. So there are a couple teams that have, in the vein of packages, there are a couple teams that have a nice combo of starting pitching and relief pitching that we could be interested by. I mentioned left-handed relievers, and so that's what I was looking for here. But the Tigers have Jack Flaherty, which mentioned earlier. He needs to be talked about a little bit. He, whether you like it or not, is amazing. He's a very different pitcher than he was last year. He's throwing his breaking stuff harder. He's commanding it well. The slider usage has gone up. I said he's commanding the breaking stuff. He's really commanding everything well. He is walking only 4.6% of hitters faced. He has a 32% strikeout rate, which is just elite. The guy is incredible, and we would be very, very lucky to have him. He is a rental only, but if you're looking to package things, Tigers also have Andrew Chafin. He also has a K rate over 30%, chase and whiff rates both in the top 5% in all of baseball. Average fastball is less than 92, but he is a primary slider guy. Not quite Austin Adams level. He throws it less than half of the time, but it is his primary pitch. He runs pretty low ground ball rates, which is usually concerning. But for us, it should play just as well as it does. He's in Comerica right now, another pitcher-friendly stadium. Should play very well for us. The San Francisco Giants, this is a team that's kind of the opportunistic, adding and subtracting that I was looking at. So Blake Snell is on here. Mentioned him earlier. He's obviously being thrown around as a potential trade candidate. The Orioles were linked to him even today. He is probably a rental. I think he's got a unique contract situation that might make a deal tough, to be frank. He has an opt-out after this season. He made $32 million this year, with $17 million being a non-transferable bonus. So we would only pay down a portion, or we would only pay him a portion of the $15 million that is his actual salary. The salary for next year is quite high, but $38.5 million, I believe, is what I saw. But the presumption is that he would chase the security of a longer contract and opt out after this year. That's what he went for last year. The market did not agree. But yeah, so he is probably a rental. The left-handed reliever that would theoretically come with him would be Taylor Rogers. He's controllable this year and next on a free agent contract. So once again, this is a question as to how much the Giants really want to sell. But 97th percentile hard hit rate, 27% K rate, which is in the 80th percentile, really just, dominates hitters of all sorts and does it in a unique way because he's a sinker baller, in the low to mid 90s. He's not a high octane guy, but very much could step into leverage situations of all sorts. Just a really, really talented pitcher. And the only regret I would have is splitting him from his twin brother out there. But the last team on here is the Mariners. You've heard about all of the starting pitchers, the Brian Woos, oh my gosh, Bryce Millers, Logan Gilberts, George Kirby's, Emerson Hancocks, all of them. Luis Castillo's name has been thrown around a little bit. I'm not going to talk too much about them. All of them are great. We'd be lucky to have any of them. The relief arm that would be interesting from them, though, would be Taylor Saucedo. He's a free agent in 2028, so we'd have him for a number of years. He's a bit interesting. He's a soft tosser. He has a 6-pitch mix, which is really unique for a reliever. Doesn't feature all of those really, really heavily, but does throw a bunch of different pitches. But that said, runs a ground ball rate over 50%, K rate just south of 28%, right in line with what Taylor Rogers is doing. He is also a bit of a sinker baller, also is only throwing in the low mid 90s, but Taylor Saucedo have been really, really effective. I just got a notification that Tommy Pham is going to the Cardinals with Eric Fetty, so never mind on him. Just remember, people, never try to record when the trade deadline is popping off. It doesn't work out for anyone. You give outdated information and you feel ridiculous doing it, and everyone listening is hearing outdated information. Anyway, I think that's going to be my cue to cut it off here. If you could be so kind, like us, rate us, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you prefer. We appreciate it very much. It helps us reach new listeners and helps us build this community we've got. So as always, can connect with us on Twitter at The Warehouse Pod, or you can email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. I think my closing notes here are just going to be that it's kind of fun to be a buyer. Last year we were a little bit hesitant. Now we know we have some financial support. We just went and got Zach Eflin. He's going to be $18 million next year. We've got some financial support. Clearly can be a little bit stronger buyers this year. I think jumped the line a little bit to make the 2 moves that we did. I think we are set up to make more. We got Zach Eflin and traded away all people at AA, so we've still got the Kyle Stowerses of the world in our back pocket. I think that there's no reason to think that this next day and a half is going to be quiet for us. So, good time to be an O's fan. The team is struggling, of course, but there's no reason to think that Gunnar Henderson is going to keep hitting poorly, Adley Rutschman's going to keep hitting poorly, et cetera, et cetera. The team is going to get better. We are bringing in reinforcements. Hopefully a little bit of a spark with some new energy in the clubhouse will shake things up a little bit, help us out, and we'll be on our way to the postseason. You guys have a good one. Thanks for listening, and go O's.